Hi, everybody, and welcome to the second in our series in Conversation with Foster Wiki. I'm Sarah Anderson. I'm the founder of Foster Wiki, and we're very excited about all of these new interviews that we're doing. And one of the most crucial things that is fantastic about this is so many more foster carers are willing to come forward with their voice. In the old days, this would have been unheard of because, as you know, foster carers work in a climate of fear due to actually the control allegations have over them, and also the fact that they are, well, how can we put it, controlled and owned by the people that they work for. So people have been very, very worried about speaking up. However, fostering is now really in crisis and it's getting to a critical point. So more and more foster carers are at that point where they say, well, I'm on my last child, or, well, I'll give up if they come after me, you know, and they want to speak out on behalf of foster carers around the UK and, more crucially, our children. So no foster carers, no foster care. Today, I'm extremely delighted and privileged to have here Phil Sharrock, who is a foster carer and a former head teacher. And today we're going to speak about two very important subjects that I know many of you can relate to, and that's keeping connected with children that move on from foster care. And part two is empty beds. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Phil so he can tell us a little bit about himself and how he got into fostering. Phil.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for asking me onto this conversation. Yeah, I've been a head teacher. I've been involved in education for many, many years. I was a head teacher of 4 schools around the country and fixed them from inadequate and got them into a much better place. And then about 4 years ago, my wife said she'd love to foster, and we discussed it and talked about it, and we sort of thought, yeah, we can. It would be really good to get an insight into those vulnerable children who, from in a home way, rather than dealing with them from a school's perspective. So yeah, we started the journey. We were accepted at panel about 4 years ago, and we've been fostering ever since. And we've had about 9 or 10 children come through the house. It's terrible to say that, but really we've had 2 children long term and about 7 or 8 on respite. So you know, that's the way that it has been.
Yeah. Well, thank you. These two subjects we're going to talk about, I know, are very close to your heart. So let's talk about keeping connected first of all. It's a really, really emotive subject with so many carers because so many lose children through no fault of their own or the children's. One way or another, children get moved on, whether it be allegations, lack of support, you know, unsubstantiated allegations, all sorts of reasons. Money, unfortunately, comes into it as well when children moved on. Now, in 2019, the Fostering Network did actually start a campaign on keeping connected, and all the great and good, from the government through to ministers and people around the UK, all came on board and said what a marvellous idea it was and that we should campaign for it, and it was really vital. Oh, that's 3 years ago. Nothing much seems to have happened since, and certainly on the front line, none of us have experienced anything different, which is so typical of fostering. You know, so much is talked about and said and recommendations made, but we very, very rarely see any change on the front line. And as all of myself and all my colleagues have been talking about, and in fact Phil and I talking about before we started this interview, is that actually it's not getting better and it's not staying static. It is getting worse, much worse, and we all need to speak up about that. So let me read you a little bit about the Fostering Networks campaign and why keeping connected is so important. I'm reading it here from my notes because I won't remember it all off pat. So despite the spotlight being on this issue at governmental level and the Fostering Network launching a nationwide campaign in 2019, it appears that more children and young people continue to lose significant and important relationships in their lives through no fault of their own or that of their carers. Moving on in foster care is a time for a proper ending, not a forever goodbye, as abrupt endings are likely to lead to separation and loss issues for children. It is now widely held that an important role of the foster care is to support a child to develop a strong internal working model, and because of this, children are then capable of developing additional and secure attachments. This change in understanding is critical to the role that the foster carers play in supporting a child in the transition to their new family or living arrangements, and advocates a need for the supportive and positive presence of the foster carers throughout and beyond the transition process. While there will be some occasions when it is not in the child's best interest to keep in contact with their previous foster families or others, these will be the exception rather than the rule. We need a culture shift to ensure that the starting position in any transition planning is for ongoing contact. Now, that's what the Fostering Network said 3 years ago, and it was universally congratulated, that campaign, and everybody recognised it. But I can tell you now that not continuing contact with children is the rule, not the exception. So I'm going to hand over to Phil now, because Phil, I know this is very dear to your heart and something's happened to you recently.
Yeah, I mean, and that is exactly what happened to us recently. We had a little boy with us for 3.5 years, and we brought him a very long way. We got very little help throughout the whole process, and he was a very
lack of support.
Yeah. He was a very traumatized little boy. Eventually we had to give notice on the placement because he was really struggling. But saying that, we were his family, and we were my wife and I were the closest thing to a positive attachment that he had in his entire world. But we recognized that we couldn't give him what he needed, so he ended up in a residential and for that to happen at 9 years old, I think showed just how serious his issues particularly were. They were going to try and put him in another foster home, but we advocated strongly. And I have to say, being a former head teacher gives me clout in those meetings. If I wasn't a head teacher, they wouldn't listen to me. But because I'm a former head teacher, they do. It does help me to advocate for the children. I've seen meetings turn on their head when half an hour into it, I say I'm a former head teacher, and instead of them being ignored, I'm listened to. That's a side issue. He and then we planned a very careful transition for him down to his residential home, and all was well. It all went well. The plan was for us to keep in touch, because the residential home and the social worker at the time recognised that it was a positive attachment. It was a good thing, and he continued to keep in touch. He controlled it. He made sure he decided when and how he wanted to keep in touch, via email or a Skype or a phone call, whichever way he wanted to do it. And then suddenly, about a fortnight ago, we got a phone call from a newly appointed social worker that said he's going to ring us on Saturday, and that will be the last contact.
What? Did the social worker know the child then? No, obviously, she must have known him from a previous situation.
No, I asked her on the phone. I said, "Have you met him? Have you spoken to him?" And it went very quiet. And if she had met him, she'd met him once. She'd been there for an initial visit. She came back, spoke to a manager, and they didn't speak to the child or hear the voice of the 9-year-old little boy. And consequently, it was then going to be ended on a phone call at the weekend. Anyway, we were apoplectic with horror, as you can imagine.
I can imagine.
Not for us, but for
the child.
For the child. Come the weekend, the residential home rang us and asked us, said, "Look, this isn't right," because we've spoken to him and said, the phone call at the weekend is the last thing, and he's got deeply upset about it, and very angry and very upset about the fact that he can't contact you anymore. And we've said, well, that's absolute nonsense. That's exactly what we want. We want to keep in touch. If we were hurting him, if it was causing him anxiety or stresses or worries, we would obviously withdraw, because it's not a good thing for him. And he knows he's not coming back to us. He knows he's going to be moving on. The lies that came from the social workers in terms of it was always the plan that you were going to get out of his life, and it's like, no, it wasn't.
No.
That wasn't the plan at all. And it's a new social worker on a bit of an ego and a power trip to basically rubber stamp her authority over this, and thinks that the one positive attachment in his life should get out of his life. And it's just like, no. And if I don't get a reasonable response in terms of this young man being able to keep in touch with us on his terms, on his
Yeah,
terms,
absolutely. Yeah.
as long as that can continue, because there is a bond there. There is a bond. There's no doubt about that. And we would hope that he could have kept in touch until he'd all grown up and then come and met us in our retirement home, you know, and all that sort of thing. But he, but if I don't get a reasonable response, then I am going to be causing a bit of a stink about it, because this is not for the benefit of the child. And, and it's got to stop. This kind of thing has got to stop, because this isn't about me. This isn't about my wife. This is about a little boy and having a positive attachment with some people for the first time in his life. And a complete stranger walks into his life and says, no, we're going to completely take that. We're taking that away from you. And that's just, it's just, where's his rights? Where's his voice? Where's his, you know, who is listening to the little boy? So, you know, I will go over their head. I will go to independent advocates, IROs. I will go to children's commissioners. I'll go to directors of children's services for this local authority and just say, what the hell is going on?
Absolutely.
You cannot do this. So, but we will see how it resolves itself, because the residential home he's in, we're just going, this ain't right. This just, you just can't. But they're in that unfortunate position of don't bite the hand that feeds you. Oh, and I get that. You know, we understand that, but it's a case of this. But this is about a little boy. This is not about money. This is about a little boy. We are not contacting him. He's contacting us, and that's how it should be, because he needs. It's just him knowing that we are there for him. So
it literally doesn't make sense.
No,
on any level, does it? You know, it makes sense for maybe, I don't know. There's all sorts of reasons and agendas, but the one thing it doesn't make sense for, which everybody claims from the tops of their voices that they're doing, is putting the child's needs first. It just does, you know, that is not the number one agenda here, and it never is.
If this placement had ended badly, and there was a lot of anger, and there was a lot of, you know, frustration for many months, and there was a lot of, you know, there was no bond, then it's right that it should end, and it's right that a child should move on and get the opportunity to grow and develop somewhere else. That's right. But when a placement has ended well for the right reasons, and everybody understands it, including the child, then if there's a positive attachment there, then that it's inhumane. Do you, you know, if your best mate moves to the other, if somebody that you love and you care deeply about moves away, do you suddenly stop talking to them for the rest of their life simply because they've moved away?
Exactly.
It's a load of nonsense. You don't do that to people. Keep in touch, as long as it's not. Yes, he is a child, and as long as it's not upsetting him, as long as it's not creating any problems for him, then why on earth can't that attachment and that bond continue in whichever guise which he has control over? It's been deeply hurtful and deeply concerning.
I couldn't agree more, and I wish I could say to you, wow, you know, this is a shock horror. I've not heard this before, but I hear this week in, week out. And I can absolutely tell you as well, the exception is not that, you know, that it is not normally, because yes, placements break down, but even if there's a little bit, I know from my own situation, you know, even if there's a bit of aggro at the time, maybe it's a teenager, maybe, you know, whatever the situation is, actually children and young people have, and especially dysregulated trauma, children that are led by their own trauma, this, you know, goes up and down all the time. And although it may have not ended in the most perfect way, the majority of young people have formed, and children have formed, bonds with you. And actually, maybe one of the best things is that you don't end on that point, even when they go wrong. But I can categorically tell you as well that there are many agendas for contact not continuing, and it's, in my experience over all these years supporting carers, thousands of them, it's not usually led by the needs of the child. So thank you on that one. And we've raised the issue here. If there's anybody out there watching in the industry, or, you know, the great and the good, the powers that be, get in touch with us here at Foster Wiki, and we'll put you on to Phil as well, so he can elaborate on his experience. And let's see if we can't really do something about this. So we'll move on to our second subject here, which I've labelled empty beds. And you know, it may seem a surprising topic given the massive recruitment drive going on and the well-documented issue of us being in need of an additional, wait for it, 25,000 carers over by 2025. That's how many carers we need. That's how short of beds we are for our children. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of comments here from foster carers that I've, you know, asked of this question of foster carers and got a bit of feedback. So let me give you a couple of quotes before we speak to Phil. I've been through panel 7 months now, and all we've had is respite, which is few and far between. We went with an IFA, which is a private agency, who said there'd be loads of placements, but now we are doubting our decision. There still seems massive recruitment for foster carers, yet we've not had a single referral for 4 months. So there are several reasons, in my view, for this kind of thing. And one of the main reasons is that we do not own our own licenses. So believe it or not, anyone who's watching this who isn't a foster carer, we must be the only, you know, profession in the world where our license is owned by the people that we work with. So we can't just move around like a social worker would, or anyone in the care sector say, well, I'm done with this job, or I'm done with this organisation, I'm moving to an X. And don't forget, when we move, we take the children, so it doesn't disrupt them. But no, we can't do that without going through a transfer process, which means usually takes about, I don't know, 5 to 8 months. And despite all the calls of a register and all the rest of it, there are fundamental reasons why that won't change until we own our own Form Fs, which is our license to foster. That's because of this ownership sort of situation where you can only work for one provider, you can't work for anybody else. And, you know, independent licensing in the independent licensing body for foster carers, where they own their own license to foster, would make things a very different. So the other reason is each agencies are also keen to recruit, as a carer adds significant amount of value to the agency. So you can understand that they don't really want to lose us with our own licenses because it's about money. So for instance, you know, we had 150 to 200,000 pounds on the value of each agency. So they can have a collection of carers in an agency, sell it on, which is what a lot of the big business is about. There are some good non-profits and charitable agencies as well. We can talk about that on another time. However, you know, it's about money. They don't want to lose you because of money. This means we cannot work for anybody else. So it means there are lots of carers throughout the UK. There's even a Facebook group called Foster Carers with Empty Beds. Can you believe it? In this time of desperation for needing foster carers. Phil, again, raised this issue with me, and he's had a recent experience of it. So, Phil, tell us your experience.
Yeah, the interesting thing that happened with us was, it was a little while ago, we had an empty room, and, you know, we were with an IFA. And we were saying, you know, exactly the same as you. There's all this need, and yet nobody is coming forward. You know, now we're with a tier 1 IFA, so, you know, we're quite, you know, we're with a good agency, Ofsted Outstanding, they say, Ofsted Outstanding. But we found it very, very strange that we were sitting here with an empty bed.
Yeah.
When there was a desperate need. At the end, we said, well, we're going to go. You know, if you can't fill this bed, we're going. You know, and then strangely referrals started to arrive. And the interesting thing was, I rang up my local authority, who I knew were running at 109% capacity. Okay.
Yeah.
They were desperate, and we were right in the middle of their local authority. Okay. Geographically, we are here. You know, and we said, we've got an empty bed. All they were interested in was, oh, you want to transfer to us? And I went, no, I'm not bothered about that at all. I'm saying to you, you need foster carers' bedrooms. I've got a bedroom right in the middle of where you are. Now, do you want to place with us? And then we can keep the kids close to family and close to school and continue things, you know, in terms of the commissioning. They couldn't give a damn because we were with an IFA, not interested. And that's the typical problem within the commissioning aspect of it. And I think that, you know, we talk about an independent license and being able to work for yourself. You know, yeah, you'd remain self-employed. A register's a waste of time because you don't have control over who you are. you know, and I often thought, I wonder if I could, if I was thinking of fostering, I wonder if I could do a Section F independently and fund it myself. And then
do your own Form F, yeah, which is again, as to the people who don't know what that is, that's our license to foster. So could you do your own license? And what did you find?
Well, I didn't really dig into it, but what I did think is, if I was to do it again, I'd do it that way. I'd do it independently, and then I could walk about and I could go to my local authorities and my local IFAs and say, I'm an independent, I'm here, I've got an empty roof. And then I have control over my own life. I've often likened it to the old football analogy of the Bosman ruling, where you own nothing. You're not in control of your own status and your own working rights or anything, and basically you're at the whim of somebody who's just paid out for a license.
And which working rights are those?
Well, you know, it's the wrong thing to say, obviously, of course, but
no, but I mean, in the sense that is the right thing to say, because actually we should have rights. We're human beings, we should have rights. We are so clearly in a contractual arrangement with the people that work for, but the whole point is, isn't it, that you hit the nail on the head. We are not in control of our own destiny, our own lives even, and actually this system destroys lives at times of allegations and things. So you're absolutely right in that, and it would also immediately improve the empty bed situation.
Of course, yeah, because I mean that's the thing. We have empty beds because of the commissioning, because of the way that they should. And there have been various reviews into the care system in previous years that have said it should be an even playing field. You look at what's best for the child, whether it's an IFA or a local authority. It doesn't matter. You look at what's best for the child. But it's never, ever worked that way because of money. It's always about cost. It's always about cost. And,
absolutely.
And this is why IFAs and the, the private equity firms are making billions out of vulnerable children. You know, foster carers aren't making billions out of it, but you can make a living. Yeah, you can make a living, and the tax breaks are terrific, and rightly so, because we're looking after the country's children. But it's having an empty bed in an authority that is running at 109%, and they're just not interested in using you because of the commissioning and because of the way that because you're not a foster carer with the local authority. And that's just ludicrous. We might need 25,000 new foster carers, but I'll tell you what, how many beds are empty? And that 25,000 will come right down. I'd be so interested to know how many foster carers you actually need if you filled the beds that are actually there and available. I bet it'd be a lot less than 25,000 because the beds are already there. They're just not commissioning them in the right way. They're just so blinkered in their thinking. It is a very tick box blinkered culture that runs on fear of allegation across the board and stops anybody from doing anything productive for the kids. And it's just bonkers.
It is. You're absolutely right. And it's heartbreaking as well, because they are so short of beds for children that this is sort of. And the other thing is, myself and Robin Finlay from the National Union of Professional Foster Carers, I'm a special advisor to the union. We recently had a meeting with Wendy Beattie, the Assistant Director of the Department for Education, and the fostering department, which, as I spoke to you before we started, is disappointingly 2 people, and even more disappointingly, those 2 people are in a job share. So it shows you how much they think about fostering. But we had a meeting with them, and we put forward to them a whole document of, proposals of how to improve recruitment and retention, and importantly, this issue of empty beds. I noticed they're having a debate in Parliament on the 21st of April now, and I've seen the paperwork and the things that they're going to be debating, and Wendy Beattie was going to pass our suggestions and things on to the care review. Josh McAllister hasn't even acknowledged the bundle that was sent to him, let alone anything else. And here we are in Parliament on the 21st of April, and absolutely none of these issues are being spoken about, or the solutions we've put as the experts by experience have put forward. So it is very demoralising at the moment, that's for sure. thank you for that. And I think that it's really important. And I know that we'll continue to work on doing things. And I'd love you to come back, Phil, because we've got much more to discuss, I know, and your input's invaluable. And anybody who's watching, think about what other questions you might like to ask Phil, so he can come back and do another in conversation with Foster Wiki, and we can talk about it, because I know a lot of you have situations that are so similar across the UK, but you know, foster carers do work in a climate of fear. Many would be too scared to come on camera like Phil is, but we're here to discuss those issues, and we can anonymously ask Phil questions and speak and discuss things.
Isn't it interesting, Sarah, how you've said on a number of occasions foster carers are in fear?
Yeah.
What kind of system is it that we've got in this country if people are working in fear?
Yeah.
That's it. That's period. You know, cut through the bull. That's it. You know, and you know, it will be interesting.
Fear of losing everything, including the children. Plus also not just living in fear, but living in fear, looking after the most vulnerable children in the country.
Yeah. What kind of system is that?
Yeah.
Change the system. When I've improved schools, you don't need to change the people in the schools that are inadequate. You know, I've worked in schools and got them from inadequate to good, and it's exactly the same people. What you do is change the systems that those people are working in.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost more money. It doesn't cost, you know, better. It doesn't need a change of staffing. It changes the system. You change the systems and the systems that those people are working in. Change the routines, practices, and procedures. You know.
Every single. You know,
It's all you need to do.
Yeah.
But if you're not going to talk to people about those systems, if you're not going to take a holistic point of view and let school improvement will be like fostering improvement, it will be driven. If you rapidly want to improve a school, it's the TAs and the teachers that drive it. It's not the head. It's the TAs and teachers that, because they're all driving it forward, then it comes forward quickly. If you want to improve fostering quickly, speak to foster carers.
Yeah.
They're the ones who do it. Not some bod sitting as a CEO or as a director of children's services. They haven't a clue. You know, speak to the foster carers, the ones that do it. And if you do that, then you'll get, this is how we deal with it on the ground, and this is what you need to do. And this is, and it will work its way through the pyramid to get to the top, and then things will improve.
It's not even rocket science, is it? But interestingly enough, when we put all our proposals, well thought out proposals and solutions to the Department for Education, you know, and none of those solutions and ideas were going to cost more money. It's absolutely, as you say, listen to the experts by experience, and anybody out there want to listen to us, we've got plenty to say, and we have got plenty of solutions. Thanks, Bill. Before we go, I'm going to ask end on some quick fire questions for Phil that we ask everybody. But before I do, can I say to you, please subscribe. It's so important to raise our profile, raise these conversations. Let's get these conversations out, you know, let's get them viral. Let's get them out to all the people that actually need to hear them, not just foster carers who want to hear them and want to hear them said out loud. What we need to do is make sure those conversations go to the people that need to hear them. So press the subscribe button so you can see each new video that comes up. And we've got some exciting guests coming up on In Conversation With, but we'd love to have Phil back. So any questions that you've got, you can either send to myself or you can send to info@fosterwiki.com, and we will reply immediately. So ending on the quick fire questions, Phil, number one, would you recommend fostering to a friend?
Yes, but go into it with your eyes open.
Nice answer. Yeah.
Really go into it with your eyes open.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't think it's as simple as just having a spare bed.
No.
Do your research. Really do your research.
Perfect. Number two, what do you think is the single most important thing that would improve things?
An independent license for foster carers, an independent licensing body, so you have control over your life, because you have no control over your life.
Perfect. Number three, why do you foster?
because I want to make a difference to children, to help the most vulnerable, extraordinary young people who have more resilience, grit, determination, and survival skills than any other human beings that I have ever come across.
Oh, that's given me goosebumps, Phil, and I can relate to that entirely, and I'm sure that most of our audience can as well. So on that note, everybody, I think that's a good place to end the conversation. So thank you to Phil, and from me, Sarah Anderson and Foster Wiki. We'll see you next week. Okay, bye.